Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Career Corner podcast where we answer your cozy career questions. And I am super excited to be joined by Colleen Evanson today. Colleen, thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're super excited to have you. To start us off, I would just love to hear, and I think our listeners would love to hear a little bit about your general career path and what your current role is. I know you've done some story editing, some
Yeah.
producing for shows, some writing. I'd love to hear I know there's probably a lot there, so you be
Yeah.
as in depth as you'd like to be, I guess.
Well, I'll say like the top view of it is I had a very long, winding path that had a lot of like side quests before I figured out what I wanted. Um, the main points is that I didn't really start off wanting to write. I thought when I graduated, I was like, I want to produce and do like creative producing, basically. And it took me about 5 years to realize that I really wanted to write. And then once I realized that, it took me about another five to get there. Um, I took the assistant route, which I kind of worked my way up. I'm really gonna date myself here. I interned on the last season of The West Wing.
Great show.
Great
Fantastic show.
show, but real long time ago. And from there, that crew, as often happens when you're on a show, a lot of times people move on and a lot of the same people move over. So I also, my internship bridged the gap of them finishing West Wing and then the pilot of Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip. So I went over to there and then I did my LA program internship like time the LA semester abroad, whatever. I don't know what they call it now, but it's like the LA program.
Mhm.
I did that the last semester of my senior year because I just knew myself as soon as I got out into LA and saw like the real life workplace space, I was going to have a hard time going back to work to do a project at school. I just was like, I want to transition. And then also from that internship, be like, hey, remember me? I was just here.
Mhm.
Can you hire me? So I was hired a bit on Studio 60. I was a PA running base camp for B Unit, which was just like getting the actors to and from set. And I kind of quickly recognized that like as fun as it was to be on set, I really wanted to go to set from an office and not have to be like standing for 18 hours. You're kind of like rooting to go overtime, so you get like overtime pay, so your pay is like decent. You're hoping for like meal penalties, like you're just hoping for any extra money. And I had an opportunity through an Ithaca alumni that I got an assistant job. So I went back to kind of an office space, and my experience as an intern working in some of the producers' offices helped me get that based on my experience. So I worked for an independent movie producer, and I wasn't sure if I liked the pace of movies. I was like, I haven't really gone into that space. Let me see if I like it. I didn't like it. I was there about a year, but what it did give me time, I just didn't love the pace of like, by the time you got any kind of money, some producer would back out or some talent would get attached. And then the studio head would change and they didn't want that person anymore. Like there was just so much moving parts that nothing was ever set in stone. And like people wouldn't call you back for weeks. In TV, it's like, you have to call me back. We're delivering. Like we're on set. We have to shoot it. Like you can't not call me back. So I like the urgency of TV more. But what it did give me was the opportunity to read a lot. And I was reading a lot of scripts. And I kind of had this, you have this sense of how the industry is or how you've heard about it when you're young and you don't have the experience yet. And I was seeing these scripts from people who were repped at CAA, which was supposed to be like the big agency. And I would read scripts and I was like, these aren't good. I don't understand. I thought everyone who was like Aaron, it was just Aaron Sorkins everywhere, you
Yeah.
know? And then you're like, oh, and it weirdly, when something wasn't good, it actually makes it feel more attainable to me because when something is a 10 out of 10, you're like, well, I can't compete with that. But when you're like, that's not good, I could do that, I think it kind of motivates you. So I started reading a lot, meeting with a lot of writers, networking with a lot of them, and eventually kind of was like, maybe I should try to write something. So I tried and wrote my only spec script at that I ever wrote was a 30 Rock. Again, dating myself. It was like the show at the time. And I really loved that world, that space. And I basically was self-taught though. I just found the scripts and read them, studied them, figured out what kind of act break structure it was, how many kind of jokes per page, the trying to figure out the through line. Like I was kind of doing it in the dark. Um, Around that same time, I took a UCB sketch class, and UCB is the Upright Citizens Brigade. It's a improv group that was started by Amy Poehler and a bunch of other guys, and technically Del Close, but it's mainly known now, I think, as like Amy Poehler's space. I took a sketch class and I kind of fell in love with writing there because every week you had to show up and you had to have something. So it forced me to write. It forced a deadline. Sometimes I would be panic writing it the night before, not gonna lie. But we would like sit down and I didn't know it. Again, I didn't know at the time. I didn't know what I didn't know. That was kind of a test run of what a writer's room was like. We would get an assignment, we would then sit in the room, we would like do a table read of our sketches, we would give feedback, we would do exercises. We by the end of the class, I had basically like a green writer's sketch packet, you know? So you have materials then to be like, hey, I want to write. Also, here's evidence of me writing, you know? Um, and from there, I kind of stumbled around and I got my assistant experience helped me move up. I wanted to get back into television, leaving movies, and it was just in time for the 2008 writer strike. So I was like, okay. So I pivoted and I got a job working for a production company, working for the president of the production. And they did behind the scenes special features like, um, remember those? The like special features that happened. They also did the commercials for DVDs, which was like, they did a lot of DreamWorks stuff, like coming to DVD is Madagascar 2, that kind of stuff. And I really learned the pipeline of how to assist at like a higher level where I was dealing with hearing how my boss dealt with the studio and the studio notes on the phone, dealing with him and what his needs were. There were separate departments within that studio that I had to help kind of gatekeep with a production like section. There were independent producers that were in-house. We had editors in-house. We had a graphics team in-house. So I kind of learned how to communicate with all the different parts and learn that language. I also got like really good at lying on the phone about being like, oh my God, that thing didn't arrive. I have to call that courier. Oh my gosh, where is it? Because this was also before there were just like links you could send. You had to wait and burn a DVD and have a messenger then drive it to someone else. Like it was what? Now you're just like, it's done, click send.
Yeah.
So wild. Okay, so then from there, my boss had basically I started helping to produce some of those commercials of like coming to DVD, and he offered me a full-time like producer slot at the company, and I was like, I don't want to do this. I referred to that job as a golden handcuffs job, which was like the pay was pretty good. I could literally bike to work. It was so close the people were nice, but like it wasn't ultimately what I really wanted to do. And I knew so many people that kind of like got lulled to sleep in the security of something that they kind of were like, it's good enough. And I was like, I don't want it. So again, through a network of some Ithaca people, I was able to interview for a executive producer assistant on a show that was called Make It or Break It, and the it was on ABC Family, which is now I think Freeform. I was kind of a brat about it at the time. I'm not gonna lie. I was kind of like, "What's this show? I've never heard of it." I worked on The West Wing, like, and it was kind of a perfect example of a different theme I learned, which was like what I thought I wanted was not what I needed. And I was very loose because I didn't really have the stakes of like, I really need this job, and I wound up getting it. And it wound up being like one of the best jobs I've ever had because there was such a openness because it was on cable and not like a big network show. And not, this isn't everywhere across the board, but when there is bigger shows like that, there's usually not as much wiggle room to like move people up. And in cable, where it was a little looser, there's a little less stakes. It was easier to like give people shots. So I had opportunities, and on that show, I grew from being the executive producer's assistant to then they offered me the writer assistant position. And then after that, they wanted to staff me, but the show got canceled. And that happened like rinse and repeat like three more times. And I was kind of at a place where I was like, man, I don't know that this is gonna happen. Like, what's my backup plan? Like, what am I doing? And in that place is where I also did some side quests where doors opened that I just tried stuff. Vine became a thing. I was like, it's silly. I have like a love-hate relationship with it. Just saying that like I was mildly Vine famous back in like 2013, 2014, which is absurd, but I've come around to finding an affection for it because I was unemployed. I had that year of unemployment that everybody has, at least a year of it. And I was just trying stuff and it was occupying my mind and it made me tell a visual joke every single day. And I got very good at like set up, punchline, blow, set up, punchline, blow over and over and over again. And I networked in that space and met other people. One of my good friends that I did a bunch of dumb vines with is a now YouTube star named Garrett Watts.
That-
He and I are good friends. We traveled to Europe together after he helped get a bunch of us into an IHOP commercial that I was in. Um, Crazy. So, yeah, so it was a weird, wild time, and from that, all of a sudden, I was in front of the camera, and I had done improv in the past and like had fun with it, but I I was doing it because I was the most available actor to myself to perform the bit in the way that I wanted it to be. Um, and all of a sudden I was getting opportunities to like host stuff, or I auditioned and got into a internet pilot that was full of Viner women, but someone else wrote our material, and I think that was what made it not connect as well. Um, and I kind of learned also like this was fun, but I don't want to be in front of the camera. Like I want more control behind the scenes, and I like to be able to like show up in pajamas and be done. So yeah, I learned a lot about that, and then I got an assistant job um, on an animated show. And I was also, as what happens a lot of times in small productions, I was like the writer assistant, the EP assistant, the office manager, the payroll person, like in charge of the intern, like everything. I found our office, I closed the office, like it was crazy. It was like me and the two EPs were like first in and last out. Um, and that was a great opportunity though, because they hired me. They liked my sample, but the room was small, so they were a little nervous about hiring me, but they promised me a freelance script, and they did make good on that. So I did get my first credit with them, and that opened up a whole lot of other doors as soon as like I was a woman in animation comedy, and there at the time not a ton of us. So a lot of doors opened. One of the places I met was at Disney, and I it turned up I did not know I was up for a show that they thought I wasn't right for, and when I heard it was like the Star versus the Forces of Evil, and I was like, yeah, I don't think I was actually right for that. But I met everyone, and that helped get me in that door over there. But then 2 years went by, and that's also when some Vine stuff happened. I also joined the CBS Diversity Showcase as a writer, and that was like SNL boot camp. Like every day you're writing a sketch. If it gets picked, you have to perform it in front of the whole room of like 50 people. You have the actors you got to pull aside for like 5 minutes to run it once. It gets critiqued live as you do it, and then it either gets banked for a potential show for the showcase or dead. And that, as terrifying as it is, and when I think about that, I didn't know what I was getting into. It was just you were there and you were figuring it out, and it really prepared me for being able to be in a room to not be precious about ideas of just like you'll always think of something else, right? Like it's fine. Um, but I did wind up getting four sketches in the show, which was cool. And around that same time, then I was up and got the job for DuckTales. But they brought me in again 2 years later, and I was just kind of like, where did you even find me? Like, Um, but yeah, and I remember I kind of had a little bit of the stigma that I think some of the general industry has on some animation, where I was coming more from a live action background, and I was like, well, I don't really want to write like a kids show. Like I thought it was more junior, and when I met the EPs, they were like, we want to do Indiana Jones meets Arrested Development, and I was like, I like both those things. And they had me, funny enough, they had me test for it where they wanted me to write a paragraph summary of like an episode that happened in their local town of Duckburg, for those who know the lore. And then they wanted a globe-trotting idea. And they paid me for both. So you should get paid for your work when it's a big corporation, I'll say that. And they actually, when I got brought in to do like a brainstorm summit thing before we started the room, they had the Bible, and in the Bible was my idea of the globetrotting. Like, and I went, oh my God, like they picked my idea for like part two of the pilot. Like, that's crazy. So I was excited but terrified at the same time of like, oh my God, they hired me based on my ideas. My ideas better be good. Like, because I didn't know anybody. Like a lot of times, sometimes it's who you know or drafting off of a friend of a friend. I didn't know anybody. Everybody else they knew from either other stuff or they went to college together. So I was like the new kid in the room. And then DuckTales was like my grad school. I hadn't been on an animated project that was more in-house like that. The one before that was really outsourced to like Canada, and so we didn't really have an interface of a real like structure. And it was my first jump into it, and it was great. Like we we would all break every episode. We got credit for breaking every episode. I wrote like 5 scripts a season because it was a 24 to 25 episode season order, which is like unheard of nowadays. And we did 3 seasons, so I learned 75 times how to make a show. And we would pitch our own episodes once we were finished breaking it. We worked with all the directors, the board artist teams. We went to the records. We dealt with the editors to figure out how to cut stuff down. We would be in note sessions with the execs. Like it was such a training, like camp or ground for learning how to run a show. And that was ultimately what I wanted to do. So from that experience, then I was able to get the job as the head writer for season 2 of Monsters at Work, which is like a Pixar collab with Disney. Um, that was a good experience too. And that was a little bit more serialized. We only did like 10, but every episode kind of connected. I was working with some movie people from Pixar, and this was their first like foray really into TV. So we were kind of like collabing on how to do both. Um, and then from there, I've been doing a bunch of development. They worked on the original Prep and Landing specials from years ago, and we had a good working relationship for Monsters that they brought me on to help do the new special that came out this past holiday season. And then I'm currently on an overall deal with Disney, which just means they make me do a bunch of projects at once. And I'm in development on a couple of things. One, we're hoping that the special did well enough that we get to make more. Um, and um, and then I'm not sure how much I can say, but I'm working on a book adaptation that we're hoping to get a green light like in the next couple of months at Disney. And for that, I would be an executive producer on it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's super
So
exciting.
that's like the long winding career stuff.
But that's exactly what we like to talk about. One of the big
Yeah.
themes of this show is the nonlinear career path, that it's
Yeah.
never just going to go the way that you maybe imagine it's going to. And
Yep.
also that industries change a lot. And I think you highlighted that excellently. I think you've experienced that firsthand quite a
Yep.
bit. I mean, being one of the early Vine people that's a big deal. Nowadays, parkies are being told social media is the future. Get on social
It's
media.
so crazy. It's so crazy. We were all a humble brag. LA Weekly called us the Viners of the Year. Me and Garrett. We were because we used to do like a bunch of late night, like kind of like Portlandia weird stuff.
Mm.
Feel free to Google it. You'll find it. It's very silly. Um, but yeah, it was such a weird time. It felt like the Wild West. And then in the same instance, going from more linear TV to the streaming services, like I was at Disney as they transitioned from like they had Disney XD and Disney Channel and ABC, and now it's Disney Plus. And we were all like, what is Disney Plus? Like it felt like the Wild West, and we were all like, what's the tone of it? What are we doing? How does it work? I think we're still kind of figuring that out sometimes. But yeah, it's a very different landscape. And I'll say also in the offshoot of like I have had this Disney path, but once that door had opened, I then was able to do some freelance stuff, and I worked on DC Superhero Girls at Cartoon Network. I got to do some Kid Cosmic episodes on Netflix, and then Amazon Prime's. And so he had known me through DuckTales records that he put me up to do a freelance episode, and that's how that happened.
Wow. That's
So it's like it's all kind of like a lot of it once you're in and you connect, it's a lot of like who's doing what and what relationship do you have and is there an opportunity?
mhm. I love that. And I love that you mentioned a golden handcuffs job. I think that's such a great line for that. Like, I think a
I've
lot of,
had a few.
yeah. And I think a lot of students don't think about that. You just think about, I need to get a job, not, is it a
Yeah,
job that I actually want to
of
do?
course. I will say when I was interning on the West Wing, again, I don't mean to, it sounds like I'm trying to like drop names or something, but when I was interning on the West Wing, mm, Um, I used to talk to everyone I could on set just to figure out what their story was. And a lot of people want to go after like the directors, they want to talk to the actors, they want to talk to the writers, and they were a lot more protected. So I had more access to like the first AD, the script coordinator, and they were thrilled for to have somebody ask what they did. They were thrilled when I wanted to go to like see a casting session or see an editing session and get to talk to the editor doesn't get to talk to anybody, you know? So I me being there, it was like this crazy wealth of knowledge. And one of the themes, again, I noticed, especially within crews, anyone that I talked to, whether it was a grip or a best boy or the lighting guys or the camera guys, it was like, well, I wanted to direct, and then I got into the union, and the money was pretty good, and then I had kids, and it's good enough. And I was like, okay, like, and they as I'm getting older, I'm now kind of aware of like stability really is a lot more um interesting or attractive to me than like the glitz and glamour of maybe like a pop culture thing. Like, because I've had friends be a part, and I've had friends be on big shows and win big awards, and it's always the grass is greener. There's always some kind of cost. Not that
Yeah.
it's bad. I don't want to seem like that kind of stuff is bad, but it's like sometimes I have a good friend of mine, and she was on really big shows like TV royalty kind of shows, and we're good friends. We met when we were assistants, and she's worked her way up to being like a big TV person. And I'd be talking about stuff I was getting to do in animation where the money's not as good as WGA, and I've always kind of wanted to get back for the money, but the people are good and the work I'm doing is good. And there's kind of this silent rule as you get into it that like you have three things. Either the money is good, the people are good, or the thing is good. You're never gonna really get all three. If you do, that's like a unicorn. You need two out of the three to like be happy. Because if it's just good money, it's not gonna be enough. And I was getting experiences getting paid less in animation that she was like, you know what, I would die for that. Like so it's you never quite know. You never
Mhm.
quite know.
100%. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Take it back a little bit. I know you
Mhm.
mentioned ICLA. This
Yes.
would be a bit of a two-part question. I'd love to hear a little bit about some skills that you still use today that you might have picked up during your time as a student at IC, and then also
Yeah.
some skills that you maybe had to pick up through trial by fire after
Yeah.
college, just entering the industry.
Yeah, I will say I also kind of started at IC. I kind of applied a little late, and so I applied to the park school, but I didn't get in. And I was still trying to dabble if I wanted to do any performance stuff. So I was like thinking I would maybe try to be a performing arts person, and then I was like, actually, I think I want to learn how to make TV because it felt like a more tangible skill set. Quite frankly, I was like, I don't really want to leave with debt and be like, well, I hope I become a star, you know? Not that, again, that's just the way my brain thought about it. That doesn't mean anybody that's in performing arts that that's the only options. Um, but that's the way my brain was thinking about it. And I got into the exploratory program. I don't know if that's what it's still called. It is.
This is just recently in the past like 2 years changed to pathways, but it's the
Okay.
thing.
So it's the same. And what was great about it was I got first pick at classes. And I knew I wanted to get into the park school, so I took a bunch of park classes. Hilariously, years later, when I had made that my major, I couldn't get in without an override from the teacher. But I went to that Ithaca. I knew that they had a student-run TV program. Um, and that was so cool to me. And I like a lot of like tangible learning. There's only so much I can get from book learning. Like you have to kind of get in there and make the mistakes and see how it actually applies. And I think Ithaca has a really good reputation of having that in the industry in general. Um, so I went to that and not the like I don't know if it was maybe some kind of like a showcase night or presentation. It was almost like a version of upfronts of like here's the shows that we have, and then the showrunner like students would be at tables with applications. And I was a freshman, not even in the park school, and I was like, okay, I have no real skill set except for my wits about me. So I just wrote like silly things. I leaned into like my comedy and just wrote silly stuff on the applications. I got on 4 shows. I got on, I don't know if Frequency's still a thing. Frequency was like the MTV video music thing. So it was
Mm.
like a virtual video DJ person. So I was like a host for that. I got on I think I had to audition also though, for the improv, like Whose Line Is It Anyway show. I forget what that was called. Um, there was I actually got a producing spot on Trailer Park, which used to do like they would just like air trailers. And they trusted me. I don't know why to like do field stuff. So I was kind of doing like a Daily Show segment piece for them, and I would just do like movie parodies with like a recorder on campus. Like I did like 4 of them or something. So that was insane. And I got also on another one that was kind of more improv forward. That was like a Curb Your Enthusiasm, but shot instead of a multi-camera, it was like in the field, and I was a performer on that as well. So I just got to be my only skill set I had to offer was trying to be funny. And then once I was able to kind of lean into that and then get the experience of what they needed, that then qualified me to be like, oh, I could produce this or oh, I could figure this out. Um, I did so many of those that I think by what year was it? I got in like the park school area. And then by the time I transferred over, I applied and I got my own show. Like that was kind of like a Weekend Update meets entertainment news. So I had like people that did news for movies, TV, music, stuff like that. But it was delivered in like a comedy kind of concept. And that was a lot of trial by fire because we did live shows that were not good. And then I did some recorded shows that allowed me to like help fix the pace and put better graphics up and learn that. So yeah, a lot of it was just like I had an improv background that I knew I could lean in that could open the door. And once that door opened, I was then able to like grow skill sets and figure out how to do it. And I was also the like director that would call the takes for that show too. But I was kind of a head writer. Like there's a lot of trails as I look back of like, oh, I was kind of being a writer and a story editor, but I just didn't have the title because I was just thinking I was producing. I wasn't really thinking that I was writing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I kind of ran through that stuff at the park school, and then I took the Notorious Ben Crane's documentary course. I and that was wild. I'm sure it's still a legend where you're broken into groups based on skill set, and then you go out and you have to. That is basically honestly, that's making you be prepared to have like being able to pitch something, and then the panel is you kind of presenting to a studio or a network exec and hoping that they give you money to make your show. So a lot of that stuff really does prepare you for a lot of the like real life things, even if it's not like as high stakes.
Okay.
And I don't know
Yeah.
if I fully answered that question, but
No, totally, 100%.
okay.
Because I mean, I know that. with ICTV, with pretty much all the park extracurriculars, there's so much. It is
Yeah,
basically like hands-on, throwing you right in. And
100%.
the best thing to do as a student is to just do what you did and throw yourself at it 100% and go for it.
You just figure it out, and because that's the time you're in that sandbox to just kind of like make mistakes and, not some of the mistakes are, you didn't coordinate something, and sometimes it's like, I forgot the camera.
Uh,
Which there was a one time we were supposed to fly for the documentary class. We were supposed to like we did it about strongman events, and we were supposed to fly to like Ohio or something, and we drove all the way to the airport and got there, and I realized I left the camera in my dorm room, and we had to drive all the way back that night, pick it up and drive all the way back. Like it was
That
you
is
learn
really,
you learn that lesson the hard way.
you just have
Like,
to.
so sorry guys. Yeah.
I'd love to close this out. If you just
Yeah.
have any sort of advice, broad advice for either young writers, maybe a student who's in a similar position as you were, who maybe isn't even in park, but has something that they feel really passionate about writing wise and wants to get into it. Any advice for how they can improve their writing or just go about in their career journey, I guess.
I think a lot of times, I mean, I kind of was very impatient with wanting to get there when I first started. And again, I've sort of realized the kind of hilarious, like kind of almost the way that I think about characters when I start to figure them out of what are their wants and what are their needs. And I wanted something, but I needed something else, And I think a lot of times we want to jump to get the thing right away because there are some of those like really kind of heroic and inspired stories of people who are young that hit really soon. But if you really look at it, there's a lot of work that happened behind the scenes before they got there, you know. Um, like the Oh Mary of it all. People are like, where did Cole came from nowhere? And you're like, Cole did a lot of stuff. It's just that it hit and now you've heard of them, you know. What you're doing when you're starting is putting in your 10,000 hours. You're just starting to put in your 10,000 hours. So if you want to write, don't talk about writing, start writing, study the thing that you like. A lot of times the easiest like gateway in is to mimic something that you like, which is why I think spec scripts are a really good indicator of like, hey, I like this thing. This is proof that I can mimic this voice of this show. And I only wound up writing one spec script because the industry sort of has changed away from spec scripts to wanting to hear an original, and they want to know what your voice is. But you have to have like lived life and figured out what you want to say before you can actually just write something that maybe resonates. And I think that's the hardest thing is like first start put the training wheels on and see if you can do something that if you have a vision, go for it. But see if you can do a mimicked voice first, and then people are always going to say, okay, well, what else do you have? And as soon as I finished my 30 off, I was like, what else do you have? I was like, man, that was really hard. I need another one, but you do. And you have to get that bad script out of you so you can get better. And I'm constantly tricking myself, even today. I trick myself. The story break is the hardest part of it because you have to figure out what the story is that you're flushing out. When you're first starting, there's a million books that point you towards different ways. People use different formats. I personally really love the Save the Cat. There's a book by Blake Snyder. He has a few, Save the Cat and Save the Cat Goes to the Movies, where he applies the story structure to specific movies. It is more of a movie structure. However, especially on DuckTales, we did a lot of like kind of parodies, and our room did a abridged version of a Save the Cat structure. And it's kind of like having bumpers on when you're bowling to just like make sure you're hitting the story points that you need to hit. Because sometimes you're like, I don't know, the second in the middle, it's like it's confusing. And it's like, well, because you're not escalating things, because you're not hitting a midpoint, because you're not having the all is lost. Like that's why. And these are the Save the Cat talking points. Story Circle uses different kind of talking points, inciting incident, escalating action. Like it's all the same stuff. It's just a different specific word. And this one worked for my brain. So I use this, and I think I sent it to you guys. You can feel free to share it with everybody. Um, but I have it as like a guiding North Star whenever I'm starting a project because it's easy to kind of like fall in love with sort of like moments here or there. And I definitely do. But it has to be able to bridge more ideas than just this one thing. And the only way you're going to know that is if you write it out. So I'm constantly tricking myself with like, okay, let me look at the board. Let's make sure I have all the pieces in where they need to be. Then let's flush it out. Then once it's flushed out, it's in more of an outline, essay form. Then I make sure that that's clear. And then from there, I literally copy and paste it into some kind of uh, version of, if you don't have Final Draft, there's a program that's called like Writer Duet. There's other kind of free programs you can start off with. But I put it in there and I just break it into like format of a script, tricking myself, being like, you already wrote like half of this. It's not that hard. Like all we gotta do is just rewrite it again. And then the jokes that aren't funny, I'm like, well, just rewrite those. So I'm just constantly tricking myself because it's kind of a big task. And I think that's why a lot of people get stuck saying, like, oh, I think I want to write, and then they don't really do it. It's like, because it can feel hard and it's not going to be perfect the first time you do it. Like I notoriously call the first draft I do a vomit draft because I try to get it out of my head. I'm like, just let's not overthink it. I know that this exchange needs to be funnier. I'm just gonna put, sometimes I'm like, joke here. Like I just sort of know the rhythm of what I need, but I want to see, am I long? Especially in, for Disney, it has to sort of like, even in streaming, there's like the minutes cost money, so so it's still like, okay, am I long or am I short? Where am I long? I That means I know I'm gonna have to keep other things tighter. If I'm short, I know I can have some breathing room and have some fun. But like those skill sets I did not know how to do when I first started. I was just trying to make sure that the 30 Rock was the same amount of pages and the act break was at the same kind of spot. But I didn't know yet, and then I had to write several other, fine things to see if I could get it. And I would, you see where you get lost. But as soon as I got into the DuckTales room and saw that story structure and then did it basically 75 times, I went from being like, when they hired me, I didn't realize, but I was sort of the joke person because I was leaning more towards just, here's an idea, here's an idea, here's an idea. And by the time I ended, I was like, I know Kung Fu. Like I know how to break a story. And you can't really teach people a sense of humor. You could teach someone how to do story structure, you know, like you can learn that. Um, yeah. So it's really, I think you have to do it. You just got to put in the 10,000 hours because without my 10,000 hours on DuckTales, I wouldn't have gotten the next job and then the next job and then the next job.
100%. And I think that applies really, I mean, for all of our listeners who might not be interested in writing, that totally applies to almost any industry. I mean, you've got to be curious and
Yeah.
you've got to be committed. You've got to do the work. So can build up these connections, build up even just a portfolio of this is
Yeah.
what I can do. See, I can actually do this.
I will also say, having been like in the assistant space to then get up to that and in that intern space to be trusted, when you first start, sometimes there can be this thought of like, well, they just want me to do this grunt work stuff of like getting the lunch order or making the coffee. Like, this is so below my skill set. What we're doing, having been on the other side of that, is can I trust you? Can you do the basic task I'm asking you to do? Can you answer the phone in a normal way? Can you take a message that makes sense? Can you get my lunch order right? Can you make the coffee on time? If we can't trust you to do those basic things, why would I ask you about what else you want to do and what you really want to do? And once they see that you can be trusted, that's when people were like, "Hey, so what do And then when I was in those spaces and I'm doing a good job as an assistant, "Hey, do you have a script?" I sure do. Sent it to my boss. She hooks me up with my first agent. Like that helps open doors. Other people in on Make It or Break It. There were many different high level EP people that I sent my 30 Rock script to, and they were like, "This is really good," and they helped open door. Like, but they had to trust me as assistant first, to then trust me to read something, to then put their name behind being like, "Hey, you should meet with this person." So it's like you have to start at A. So many people want to skip to go to C, and it's like you got to start at A. Some people get to. That's nepotism, baby. But most of us don't have a dad that works at a studio that can get us that job right away. So like the rest of us have to figure, you got to start. You got to start making the coffee. I
Yeah.
don't even drink coffee. I was like, I don't know how to make this.
I'm gonna learn
But
my
you
best.
have to figure it out because why would they trust you to figure out other bigger stuff if you can't figure out the basic stuff? That's the
Mm.
truth. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I think that's great advice. I think this has been a wonderful episode. You've had such a fascinating career, a career that I think is going to be super interesting to a lot of our listeners, both within
Yeah.
Park, outside of Park.
Yeah.
And I think we got to cover a lot of really cool stuff. So thank you so very
Cool.
much, Colleen, for taking some time out of your
Yeah,
day.
thanks for reaching out. And I'm always a fan of being from Ithaca. It has a lot of affection for people, I will say, out in the industry. And hilariously, even my current CEO, Bob Iger, went to Ithaca.
Yeah, we know that name very well.
We're everywhere, baby.
Yeah, Bombers Global. We like it that way. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to another episode of the Career Corner podcast. We will see you again very, very soon.